So imagine if you are a first-time person, maybe lots of you watching have been to protests, but you haven't been arrested before. So let's imagine what's about to happen if you're arrested for the first time. So let's move on to the next slide. So with certain offences like aggravated trespass or obstruction of the highway, the police may give you a warning before you're arrested. So if you don't want to be arrested, that would be your chance to move away and distance yourself from the protest. However, it's important to remember that the warnings are not a legal necessity. So the police are not required to give people any warnings before arresting them for those offences. If the police arrest you, they should inform you of the grounds for your arrest and the name and number of the arresting officer. You should ask the police which station you're being taken to, although they may not always know, or sometimes they may be told a station that may change before you actually get there. You'll be patted down, searched, and then taken to the police van. So when you're in the back of the police van, sometimes you may be held in a van for several hours. It can be useful to revisit the 5 key messages here, especially no comment, as anything you say here, even casual chit chat, can be used against you. And that can be difficult, especially if you're in the van with other activists who you may know, or perhaps you're with a talkative officer and you're there for a long time. But it's really important to remember not to relax, basically, and to keep the 5 key messages in mind. You don't need to give the police any personal details during your arrest and when you were taken to the police van. So still no personal details at this stage. Okay, at the police station. So when you get to the police station, you may still have to wait in the van for a while for them to be ready for you. Then you may be held around waiting inside. Before you finally make it to the custody desk. When you get to the custody desk, you'll probably be subjected to a more thorough search, and then everything that you've got with you, all your possessions, will be taken away from you and listed on the custody record. Sign the custody record right below the last object so that the police can't add anything onto it after, although sometimes these are now digital. Check it a few times over to make sure that nothing has been added that you did not have with you. Your belongings will usually be returned to you on your release, or alternatively, some of them may be held as evidence until the legal process has ended. And sometimes you might not get them back until the end of your trial, or sometimes they're even disposed of with no notification. Okay, at the custody desk, you will also be processed and asked a lot of questions. So this is the point where typically it's thought to be a good idea to give your name, date of birth and address and nothing else. If you don't give these details, you can be held in police custody until charged and taken to the court on the next working day. They can only hold you usually in police custody for 24 hours before they charge you or release you. However, in the worst case scenario, if you do not provide your details and were arrested on Friday, the next available court would usually be on Monday morning. If you are planning on withholding your details, you may wish to think ahead about what kind of plea you would like to make, and you can find some guidance on that on informed dissent. The current legal position is that you do not need to provide confirmation or any documents confirming your nationality. This may change in the future, and activists with insecure immigration status in particular should keep a close eye on the latest immigration law developments. You will be asked a question about your physical and mental health. If you tell the officer of an existing mental health problem or answer the question with no comment, you will be put on suicide watch, which entails a police officer checking on you at frequent intervals, which can be disruptive. So ultimately, it's up to you to decide how you want to answer the question. Our recommendation is to do whatever feels the safest. If you take any medication, it's important to bring an unopened package of your medication along with a prescription. And the police should then ensure that your medication is made available to you at the relevant times when you need to take it. If you're injured or in need of any medical attention, make that known to the police officer, as you can request for a doctor at any time.
Cool. So moving on to stuff to do with phone calls. So as an adult, you have, well, the wording on here is slightly misleading, but you have essentially the right to have kind of two people informed of your arrest. So the first one is a solicitor. So you have the right to a solicitor. Sometimes the police will let you kind of speak on the phone. Usually what they'll do is call up the solicitor firm, the law firm, and say, we have this person here and they've asked you to be to act for them. Come to the station for the interview, whatever. Usually not that brief, but that is the essentials. The other phone call is usually one that you can make by yourself, but it's not an absolute right for you to make that phone call by yourself. The right that you have is to have someone informed of your arrest. That means you have the right to tell someone else about your arrest. But as to who does the informing, that's where it becomes a bit more questionable. So technically, the police can just inform someone else that you've been arrested. You don't have the absolute right to call someone on the phone and tell them. In practice, the police will often let you call someone and let them know that you've been arrested, but they don't have to let you do that. It's just typically is the way it's done. In that situation, it's best to ask for the XR Legal back office, and that's the number here. You will have to remember this number. They don't have it on a switchboard, but yeah, that is the number. And when you call through to that number, people on that phone, people who answer the phone, can give you some more information about your rights in custody, can try and organise like police station support, liaise with like solicitors, like appropriate adults, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good idea to call them. And also what they can do. So if you call the back office and you say, I want this person, this person, this person to be informed, that the back office team can do that. So they can inform more people about your arrests than if you were to just get one phone call to someone. Yeah. And sometimes they won't let you call, and the police will just tell the back office team that there is this person here at this station. And that's it. And then what they will try and do is try and organise support, police station support, for people to be met when they get released from the station. As a minor, so someone under 18 or someone who is deemed to be a vulnerable adult by the police, you have the right to an extra phone call. Again, not necessarily you have the right to a phone call, but you have the right to call directly or indirectly an appropriate adult, which we said before, it's usually a parent, legal guardian, carer. But yeah, we talked a bit about that before as well. The next thing is biometric information. So what they'll do here is after your personal details bit, they'll normally take like a photo of you, just like a photo, usually just of your kind of like head and like upper body. But yeah, that's what they'll do. Then they will typically take your fingerprints and like your DNA. And by what we mean by DNA is like usually a mouth swab. So they'll just get a swab and like swab your mouth. And then like take that and process it somewhere else. If you don't comply, so if you don't let them take your fingerprints, if you don't let them take a mouth swab, they can use reasonable force to make that happen. So usually what that means is like taking your hand, putting it on the reader, or like opening your mouth. There is one exception that we see kind of relevant to protest law. We didn't really talk about it too much because it doesn't come up often. But if it does, and it's breach of the peace, if you're arrested for breach of the peace, you are not required to give your details, so your personal kind of like biometric information or DNA, and you also don't have to give any other personal details. So you can just refuse to answer that, and they have to release you once the breach of the peace is over. But if they take you into custody and stuff, then, and if they ask you like, would you like a solicitor, then obviously just choose one of the protest experience ones from your bus card. Usually what they'll do is like take people into a van, drive them around like separately in different directions and then just release people. But yeah, that is that. Moving on to some of your rights in custody. So we've said it before and we'll say it again. I keep saying that, but a lot of it is just really repetitive. But yeah, it's free legal advice, and make it not from the duty solicitor. So remember, no duty solicitor as part of the key messages. Get a free protest experience solicitor on the case. The numbers are on your boss card. The names of the firms are on your boss card. So just read one off there and ask them to come to the station. You generally they'll let you speak to them on the phone to begin with, so that they can give you some like quick initial advice. Usually just like, don't say anything, don't go into interview without me there, that kind of thing. Sometimes they won't do that, but the solicitor will just be on their way. But yeah, that's what usually happens. Once they get to the station, you'll usually have like a one-to-one chat with the solicitor before interview. And you shouldn't really rely on that conversation. It's supposed to be completely private. But when you're at the station, you don't know what's in the room. You don't know if the police are listening to you. You don't know if there's like an officer with like, I don't know, like the glass thing where you just like stick a glass to the window or something outside the room. But yeah, we don't know, and we should not assume that it's completely private. So don't say anything that could be used to incriminate you or anyone else when you're at the station. As we said before, like you can have the right to have someone informed of your arrest. So make that the XR back office. The number was on the slide before, I think. Well, it will come up again. A copy of the PACE Codes of Practice. So that's the Police and Criminal Evidence Act Codes of Practice. I usually like give you like a summary kind of guide, like a leaflet, and it's just a thing that kind of explains your rights in custody. So it's worth having a read of that. An interpreter, if English isn't your first language. You have the right to food that meets your dietary requirements, and also have that food at like regular intervals. Blankets and jumpers to keep you warm, and the lights to be dimmed if you want to sleep. I don't know if it was on here or not, but like water, tea, coffee is also, you can ask for that. The other one is a doctor or medical attention if you're injured. I'm not too sure why that's not on here, but that is the other one to be wary of. And with that, it's also worth saying, if you have any medication, make sure to tell them at the front desk that you have medication, so they can arrange for you to take that. Because sometimes they need to get it checked with like a nurse or someone else that you're allowed to take it. Moving on to interview. So as we said before, free legal advice, get it. Sounding a bit like a broken record here. But yeah, don't take the duty solicitor. Make sure you get one from the bus card. If the police say like, oh, let's just go into interview, or let's have a chat now before the solicitor gets here, don't do that. Just say no. I want to wait for my solicitor, or just say no. So yeah, make sure the solicitor is there when you go into interview, or like there's any like formal-ish discussion with the police, or even informal really, or there shouldn't be any informal chat. If you are under 18 or are deemed to be a vulnerable adult, the police shouldn't interview you without your appropriate adult being present. So you should also wait for them to get there. What is often recommended in the activist world is a no comment interview, and also more generally, that's where you answer like no comment to every single question. They ask you like, what's the weather like? No comment. Or what's I don't know, something else really general. It's best to answer their questions with no comment, just because we don't want to be like striking, like going into this like dynamic of conversation. We just want to be there, answer no question, no comment, and get out. It is the aim. And also, if you start answering some questions and don't answer others, it often looks worse in court. And it's more likely, in some cases, that something called like inference of guilt may be drawn if you answer like some questions and don't answer others. But yeah, that's that. That is also, it's not just, oh, people have done no comment interviews and it's been fine in the past. It's what typically the solicitors will advise anyway. So even if like we hadn't told you this and you'd call the recommended solicitor, what they will often tell you to do is just answer no comment anyway to all questions. Sometimes they will prepare a statement to read out, and either you read that out or they read that out. And then you just answer no comment to everything else there. The police often use loads of different tactics as well, such as like guilt tripping, being like overtly friendly, being overtly aggressive. So yeah, don't kind of fall into that trap and just stick to no comment. And yeah, that is that bit.
Okay, so being released. The general rule is that the police can hold you for a maximum of 24 hours unless they get authorisation from a senior officer to hold you for longer, which is not very usual in a protest context. Maybe for conspiracy offences, might sometimes see people detained for longer than 24 hours, but not often. If you withhold personal details at the police station, it's likely you'll be kept in until you can be taken in front of a magistrate's court. Very often arrestees are released in the middle of the night, so plan for that scenario. Make sure that you don't have any commitments until and the next day, basically, that you would end up being late for, that you don't have work the next morning or anything like that. Hopefully, an arrestee support team will be waiting for you outside the station with some snacks and warm drinks. So this is where it becomes important that you have some cash with you so that you can get home safely, and make sure you know the address where you're staying by heart. Sometimes some of your property will be kept as evidence, so be prepared for that, but usually you'll be given most of your belongings, most if not all of your belongings, back on release when you're processed out at the custody desk. So let's look in more detail about the ways in which you can be released from a police station. So the first one we'll talk about is released under investigation. This is the most common one that we see in the XR context. What it means at the moment is that the police probably have insufficient evidence to charge you at that time. The CPS then has up to 6 months to decide whether to bring charges for summary offences. If you're charged, then charges can later be dropped at any time, or the charges can be altered for up to 6 months after the alleged offence. So this period after being released under investigation can be quite a stressful time, and there can be quite a lot of confusion as to what you need to do. If you're released under investigation, get in touch with us at xr-legal@riseup.net, and we can support you with tailored information in your particular circumstances. So the next one that we're going to look at, no further action, is exactly what it says. There will be no further action on your case. That's relatively unusual for XR protest arrests, but it has been known to happen occasionally. The next one is released on police bail to return to the police station to later date. This is unusual. So you'll either, when you return at the later date, you'd either have to answer a charge or you might be interviewed again. This may happen when the police have to process a lot of people on the day of your arrest and don't have enough time to do an interview with you, so you may have to go back for that. They may also be unsure or not have enough evidence on what to charge you with. There may be restrictions imposed on your release, which are called bail conditions. An example of this would be you're not allowed within the M25. If you believe that the conditions imposed are unreasonable, you can challenge these with the help of your solicitor, and often the solicitor may be able to kind of negotiate the bail conditions with the police, particularly if there are places that you need to go for your work, or just to say, well, that's unnecessary, we can reduce that area that you're not allowed to go into to something more specific. Another possibility is to be charged and given a court date. This is fairly uncommon, to be charged straight away while you're being released. You should, if this happens, you should be given a sheet with the charges. You'll be given a court date, or it may be sent to you via mail. In this case, it's important to stay in touch with your solicitor and inform them about your court dates and plan your defence and so on. You can also be given bail conditions having been charged. This is called post bail. And if you break these, you can be held in custody on remand until your trial. In some situations, you can be taken straight to court on the next day to answer a charge. This would be in specific kind of circumstances, for instance, where people choose not to comply at the station and withhold their name and address, or for some unusual offences. And the final possibility is being released with a caution. So as we mentioned earlier, the general rule is no caution. So you should only accept a caution on release if you've spoken to a recommended protest experienced solicitor and they've explained to you why you are an exception to the rule of no caution.